What's good out there, Liquid Trucking, and welcome into the Liquid Trucking Podcast. I am your host, Marcus. Thank you all so much for being here today. Today's conversation is an absolute doozy, and I can't wait to get to it. We are going to welcome in Tim Hindes, who is the co-founder of Staymetrics. He does some project management for Tenstreet, but really what the dude is just a wealth of industry knowledge and experience. Started out at the ripe old age of like 20, 21 years old, driving truck, has work in dispatching, has done a lot of work in driver retention, and just always has something interesting to say about every aspect that'll come up in conversation. So we will get to our discussion with Tim Hindes and Jason Eisenman here in just a couple of minutes. First, I do want to extend the same invite that we extend all the time on this podcast out to you drivers that are listening. If you have any ideas, things you want to hear on this podcast, things that you'd like to talk about, maybe it's an issue that you want to see addressed. Maybe you've got a story to tell that you think is funny or heart-wrenching or heartwarming. It doesn't matter. We'd love to hear it, and you drivers, just like Liquid as a company, are what make this podcast go forward. So you can send us an email anytime you want, podcast@liquidtrucking.com, and I'm always up for these suggestions. Maybe there's a topic that we've already addressed on the podcast, but you had something that you wanted to add to it, or you would have liked to be involved. That's fine too. Again, the email address is podcast@liquidtrucking.com. And my phone number is floating around out there for a lot of you. There's one guy that has my phone number that I know a ton of you guys know and have contact and access to, and that is Polar Bear. He's got my phone number. I'm more than happy with him giving it to you. He will hear this on the podcast. If you don't have my number, you can call Polar Bear and get it from him or any of the rest of the drivers that we've had on here very frequently. There is just a grip of drivers that have my phone number, and if you'd like to reach out to me directly, that's the best way to do it, but also rely on that email address. Once again, podcast@liquidtrucking.com. So on to our conversation here today with Tim Hindes. He's a jack of all trades, all right, industry expert, very smart guy, and has a very unique perspective here on the trucking industry. And I just hope that you enjoy this awesome conversation with he and the VP of HR and Safety for Liquid Trucking, Jason Eisenman. Here it is.
Welcome to the gold standard of podcasts for the gold standard of drivers. This is the Liquid Trucking Podcast with your host, Marcus Bridges.
Next up here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast, I'm very excited for this conversation and the guest that we have joining us today. And I say us because my honorary co-host is here with me. It's VP of HR and Safety for Liquid Trucking, Jason Eisenman. Jason, good to have you back.
Absolutely. Good morning.
And also here with me today, I've got the co-founder of Staymetrics, and now he's working in doing some retention and project management with Tenstreet. Please welcome to the Liquid Trucking Podcast, Tim Hindes. Tim, great to have you here. Thanks for joining us today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Now, I want to start out with a little bit of background, Tim, because the reason we're bringing you on here is because you have a ton of experience in the trucking industry on all sides of it. And let's just get some background from you. Start at the beginning. How did you get involved in the trucking industry from the word go?
Yeah, thanks for that, Marcus. And Jason, good to visit again. Most of my career has been a product of previous experiences. And my first job in trucking was a fleet driver for a fleet owner. And, it was about as low as you can get on the totem pole. My brother was the fleet owner. I was the fleet driver, and he had 3 trucks. And at that time, we're talking the early 80s. I was just 21. That was a really interesting experience for me because really, he was the owner-operator, so to speak, and I was just fleet driver of one of 3 trucks that he had. And I was super excited about it, but I could see that he was going broke. And I could see some fundamental business things that he was doing wrong that actually people still do wrong today. He decided, hey, I've got enough revenue coming in. I'm going to just stay and not drive, and I'm going to let these other 2 trucks, produce the revenue. And it didn't work for him. And so I learned that like at 21, right? 22. Interesting things that left me with what it's like to be a driver out there and how tough it's a great life, but it's tough. And I got to experience that and grab the empathy. And I mean, what I mean by that is things like, the early days as a fleet driver, I was picking up the truck at the maintenance shop half the time because it needed repairs, and the trucks were not in the best condition. I dreaded the scale houses and the inspections because that was never good for us. At 22, you don't have a lot of wisdom. So, my best idea was, well, I'll just buy his truck and I'll become an owner operator. I can do it better than he can do it, So I did. I bought one of his trucks and I signed it on with an expediter from Canada. And at the time, I just got married too. And we had a baby on the way, and just 22, 23 years old that time, pretty young, pretty fresh. And here I am, an owner operator now. I wasn't aggressive enough. I thought I knew more than I did. What does that mean? What does that look like? It looks like when, dispatch would call me on a run, and, now my little girl's born and she's crawling around the house and I'm just making some dinner, and they're like, hey man, I got to run for you, because that's what expediting is. It's kind of how I call. And where's it going to? How much does it pay? And all that. And I find myself being selective. And next thing you know, I'd have to call them. They hadn't called in a day, Marcus, and I'd have to call them. Hey guys, got anything going on? You're up number 4 on the board or whatever, And so I learned there that, hey, there is a correlation between coming through for a dispatcher and constantly being a problem, which I think I was at that stage of my maturity in my life. So I was going broke. So now I'm going broke, right? So brother already went bankrupt. Now I've got one of his 3 trucks and I'm going broke. And my wife and I got together and we said, okay, let's sell everything we have at auction and we'll move out to Indiana. And I had 2 trucking companies I wanted to work for. And at this time, this is interesting to me to look at from a market perspective, because what were the characteristics of the 2 trucking companies? Wasn't there like 40 to choose from? And there really was. But in my mind, I had earmarked 2 companies that I saw that I respected their culture. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about Liquid is Liquid has a culture that if you run into their drivers, or you run into their people, you could just tell they're different. So there were 2 companies that I wanted to go work for. So we made the decision to sell everything, right? We're just going to sell everything. We had a 14 by 70 mobile home that we just bought that was brand new. And of course, what the story's like on those. You take a beat out of when you sell that. And then I decided to sell the truck at auction. And I had a note on it, obviously. And I'm this young guy at the auction. And the auctioneer stops $10,000 short of what I owed the bank. And he points at me and he pulls me up to the block and he says, do you want to call the bank to see if they'll release the title? And I don't even know what that meant. What do you mean? What do you mean? So next thing you know, I'm on the phone with the bank, and they're like, yeah, but it was $10,000 that you're going to have to pay off in the next 3 years, So now I'm moving out. I don't even have a job in trucking yet. I just have these 2 companies that I'm interested in. And we move out to Indiana to a very low rent place that we had found. And I applied at both of them. And before I could get a call back, I had to work at Arby's. And I did. I did fast food, man. I had 2.8 ounces of roast beef going to Arby's beef and cheddar, man. And
one of my favorites, and I think an unsung hero of the fast food community, if you want my honest opinion, Tim.
yeah, see, yeah, exactly. So that was a very humbling experience for me. And it was cool. You know, I'm an ADHDer, so I kind of communicate a lot and differently with a lot of people. But what does that mean? Is I really kind of got into the fellow coworkers and what their stories were. And, you know, I had the retired grandma that just needed extra money because Social Security wasn't cutting it. You know, it was just again, from a standpoint of empathy and understanding. And when I did get that trucking job, I wasn't going to let that one go, right? You know? So the good news is by the time I really cut my teeth in trucking, and this probably applies to a lot of drivers that are out there, and I share this for newer drivers too. If they can learn from my mistakes, right, and the things I learned from, then maybe there's some benefit there. But when I got the call from the company that I wanted to get the call from, and I got the job, it was quite the opposite. By then, no, I want every run. And I was just going to do hot shots for them with their trucks. But it was one of these deals where they're like, you're going to be on the extra board. And what that meant back then was there's no guaranteed hours, man. You know, you can get 30 hours, you can get 60 hours. And what happened was I needed 60 hours. I needed everything I could get. I was still paying for a truck I didn't even own, right?
Right.
So what I would do is I would just go in that dispatch office at 4 a.m. and just camp. You know, hey, good morning, Marcus. Good morning, Jason. You know, I'm morning dispatchers. And hey, we don't have anything for you right now. Hey, I didn't say you did, man. I'm just in here having coffee, right? You know, pick up the phone as I'm watching them. So I ended up getting my 60 hours, and but you know, in that time period, the work I did really pointed to a lot of the social and economic problems that we're having today in this country. I'll share that way. And that is, got to remember, I was running hot shots in the Midwest. What does that even mean to people that haven't done it? Those are anywhere from cargo vans to straight trucks. I was in a straight truck to tractor trailers that get paid to pick up anything from one pallet or one pail of paint to 10 skids and haul them directly from point A to point B. No, you know, just right there. So I was doing that, and what that got me exposed to is a lot of second and third tier automotive manufacturers in rural Midwest. And I remember running hot shots
out there.
Yeah. And I remember a night shift. I had one particular run that they locked me on for a while, where I would go to a plant in Argus, Indiana. Argus, Indiana is an hour and 20 minutes from South Bend. And I'd pick up every night at about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And I would pick up and go to Detroit. Well, when I pick up, you're going to this plant, and, you know, my personality, I didn't know anybody, but I'd be walking around the plant talking to people, you know, hey, you know, because it's not traditional shipping hours, right? You're coming in and hey, I need one skid. So you got to find the right person. But I get to talking to people, and I saw how many housewives were there. And they reminded me of my wife in our neighborhood, right? You know, they're soccer moms, t-ball moms, they're about our age, you know, back then. And I said, and it was like 90% women on that shift. And I just asked, well, why? It seems like all women. Yeah, because the guys work the first shift. My husband's home working the first shift. Okay. So,
interesting.
Wow, holy cow. Well, then you get the news that plant got consolidated with a plant in Wisconsin, so they're going to close it now. And in my mind, empathetically, I'm like, whoa, this is tough, man. How are these people going to find work? You know, and that really, quite honestly, guys, is one of the core problems we're having right now in our country, is we've lost a lot of our good-paying rural manufacturing jobs, and I don't think we've replaced them. So that's where I'm at so far. What kind of questions do you have so far?
Well, and I'll Jason, I'll clear the way for you here in just a second too, to ask Tim anything based on what we've already heard. But I think that's a very important piece of this conversation I saw that going all the way back to the Clinton administration back in the early 90s. My dad was in the timber industry in rural Oregon. And as the timber industry kind of started to go the way of the buffalo, a ton of rural jobs, blue collar jobs, millworking jobs, where you look at a city that's got, or a town, I should say, that has 1,800 people living in it. 300 of those people are working at the mill. And you don't really stop to extrapolate and zoom out and think, man, that's a significant chunk of the population that not there's another mill across town. No, there's no mills for an hour and a half in any direction. And these people are completely out of work, and it's skilled labor that they've done for a very long time.
Yes.
So I really see that, and I think that you're right. Do you see any path to replacing these jobs in rural America that we've lost?
Well, no. And I don't even know what the bad news is. So the question you asked was the most obvious question that I've had. And about 10 years ago, I was in a peer group. What is that? It's like a group of executives, all business owners that meet once a month, and you discuss your business problems and strategies. So I was in one of these peer groups. It was super effective. 80% of the people in there were manufacturers. And so I brought this question to them. I said, hey, when will manufacturing come back? In your guys' opinion, when will it come back? Because in my mind, these guys are the experts. I've been listening to them for 2 or 3 years on manufacturing. And across the board, they said it won't. We've lost too much intellectual capital. We've lost too much, I'm a wood carver, and as you learn that skill that you're talking about, that these guys learn, you just don't stop that and pick that up 20 years later with new technology. No, that it doesn't work that way. So they were down on the fact that that it would be easy for us to pick up on manufacturing and bring it back in big force. So I don't know, and I think that's still a head scratcher, and I think it's going to be a head scratcher for us as a country. Until we can figure it out, because I think that's where the point pain is. I think there's a lot of anger in it, rightfully so, by the way. There's a lot of anger in those communities from being left behind, and I think we have got to help.
Yeah, I do too. I agree. Jason, anything that's bubbling up in your mind here as we've kind of got through the first leg of Tim's story starting out here? Any questions you've got for him?
No questions, but Tim and I are good friends and have talked a lot over the years. Super dynamic guy. Very appreciative of him coming on. I think everyone's going to listen and love the rest of the story, as I am too. He hit the nail on the head. Everybody listening right now grew up somewhere, big town, little town, and you could probably all think about, for me, it was a Goodyear plant, Textron, Ace Hardware, a large printing factory. I grew up in, Little Lincoln, Nebraska, and those are the 4 that I can remember leaving Lincoln, hundreds of jobs each, family members working at each one of them at some point, and the jobs went away to, south of the border or somewhere overseas. And so anybody listening today, whether you grew up in Kansas, Missouri, North Dakota, they all have like stories. So hit the nail on the head.
Well, and there's a point you brought up. I want to try to hit my rewind button, see if I can find it in there, because you brought up a piece of gold in there that this directly links to the problem we have right now of poor employee loyalty. And so the idea of, man, why aren't people loyal? Oh, come on, man, why aren't they loyal like we used to be? And that is really spilt milk, in my opinion, because what I did in my mind, and you guys lived it, right? You guys, I think you're younger than I am a little bit, but when this happened, I thought, what the hell are the conversations around the dinner table like? And hey, you're not doing band this year because we can't afford the instrument. Hey, we're not taking that vacation because the plant closed. And we wonder why that generation that sat at that dinner table doesn't have loyalty to their employers. We weren't showing loyalty. So I don't know if that resonates with either one of you, but that kind of jumped out at me as being very honest.
It really does. And for me, my personal experience was I watched my dad and my mom both work jobs for other people and then go into business for themselves. And starting out in my professional career, I was what you would call endlessly loyal. In fact, I used to have a line I would say in job interviews is that loyalty is probably my best and my worst quality. Because for you as an employer, you're going to look at my loyalty and think it's above and beyond. For me as an employee, that is actually probably going to set me at a disadvantage from time to time because I'm willing to trust you. And at the end of the day, you as an employer are looking out for your bottom line, not for me as the employee. And that was a very important lesson for me to learn that, hey, your employer's going to love that loyalty, but take it easy because they will also tear the carpet out from under you. And that's happened to me as a professional.
Absolutely. And that's where, we're going to get on culture here in a little bit, but that's where it's so important for drivers to know who they're getting in the truck with. And there's no company perfect. We've got a lot of great carriers we've served through the years, but I think most drivers would agree you can smell and taste the culture in a good organization. It's a differentiator that it's there, and those are the types that I think you can trust. I got to leave it right there because you don't know, right?
Right.
But so that was a pivotal part. So at that point, I was a driver. So I was a driver and if we were to hit the rewind button to what do you do in high school, other than drank a lot of beer and I was like a C&D student, ADHD, the back of the class guys. I was one of the back of the class guys. But here's another thing I want to point out. I didn't have options. And there were millions like me that didn't have options. Okay. And this is important for the young generation to hear because, why didn't you where were my options? Well, they weren't college. We were told in that part of our raising humans that there's a group that were made for college and there was a group that weren't made for college. And I was in you're not made for college. So, all right. So what are my options? Well, how about the union trades? Oh, no. Not in the 70s and 80s. You had to absolutely know somebody to get in that. Well, then what about military? For sure. Military, very common. That was the path of least resistance for a lot of folks. And then it was just slug it out in the manufacturing facilities in Argus, Indiana, and pray to God that they never close the plant because your skills aren't transferable. That's where we're at, friends. That's what we're in. Chill.
So move with me into the next stage of your career in trucking because we're at where you were driving essentially, and
Yep.
I know that you've had experience beyond that. So where did you go after the driving leg ended?
Okay, so now I'm trying to, guys. Now at this point in my career, I am trying to work deals. Okay, and I'm a deal worker. I've been a deal worker since I was a little kid. It's the ADHD in me, but I can work a deal. So now I've got the runs I want. I've got 60 hours. And I start to see that they're needing help in dispatch. So I'm like, hey, you guys need any help in there? I mean, I could come in there and, help out, And they weren't too interested in that, even though I kept offering. And then I said, what about Saturdays? What if I drove on Monday through Friday and I dispatched on Saturdays and Sundays? I'll take the whole weekend dispatch. Nobody wants that. Which, by the way, that's a hell of a strategy for somebody coming up for a career. Is you take the work nobody else wants. So I'm going to take the work nobody else wants. I'll take it. So I got it, and that was basically that was my entry into the office, and I was horrible at it, guys. I was just absolutely horrible. Remember, I moved in from another state. I moved in from another state, and you want me to do local dispatch? Like, let's see, South Bend is split up in 4, Elkhart split up in 2. I don't even know, So I had successfully alienated probably 85. Let's see, we had how many drivers? We had 33 drivers. I bet you I alienated 25.
Oh, least you're honest about it. I think that's a great part to the story.
Oh, God, yeah. Well, you learn. We grow, right? So, I mean, I'm able to do this stuff because we grow past it, right? And you learn from it. But really, I was bad at it, and there was a certain process in dispatch that required you to match paperwork, and it's an OCD thing, not an ADHD thing. And I just totally failed at it. I was always being told I wasn't doing it right, and so that kept me on Saturdays and Sundays because that work didn't happen. But they still had me drive during the week, which the drivers were pretty happy with. They liked me being in the driver's room with them rather than dispatch.
Yeah. So like, as long as he's not on the other end of the phone, we really like this Tim guy.
Man. Yeah. So this is where it got good. I got smart with the owner of the company. He was smart. Very similar to Liquid. There's some strategy in there. And what the owner said to me is, "Hey, dude, why don't you cover everybody's vacation for us for the next 2 years and come back into dispatch?" And I said, "Well, okay, I'll try that." So I did. I not only did it for a year, but this is what this did for me. These route drivers become friends. So I was a route driver. I basically became a route driver. And some routes I stayed on for 3 months, right? But you become friends and you become integrated with not only that business, but that community. Because see, when I leave daylight screen and I pull over to New York Blower, oh, Bobby's still in front of me. He was in front of me, New York Blower. So I mean, it's this cool little family network, right? And really, what does that mean to people? Is drivers control freight. If we had a good driver on a route, we got more business on that route based upon a driver being able to be personable. So put that, park that in there, guys. And for those of you that are drivers out there, don't dismiss the fact that you're being kind and courteous to that shipper and that consignee doesn't help the organization as a whole. It absolutely does, especially if your competition is a little bit rough around the edges and you guys can show a little bit more class. It's going to set you apart. So now I'm in dispatch. I go back in dispatch and I'm good. Okay. Now I'm like, hey, go on a daylight screen, tell Charlie I said hi, and don't use door 3. That damn thing's always broke. Right,
You had all the answers, just like any good dispatcher. You knew exactly what to say.
Exactly, and then how to make them more money. That was another thing that for so those of you that are in dispatch, it's a two-way coin. If you want to choose how well you're doing, and just not check the box and take a paycheck, really take personally these guys and your ability to help them pick good runs, help them get good, double up when they can, or whatever you call it in your market, and capitalize off of revenue opportunities. So I did that in dispatch, and then I thought I was all that in a bag of chips, so I was going to become a customer service manager. So I became a customer service manager, and I had like all these ideas. So Jason, you have ideas from time to time, maybe. And all these
always,
absolutely. And I came in to the boss about 4 months later, and I had an idea, and he said, "Hey, here's the deal, dude. Not only am I not interested in what you're going to say, but your job in jeopardy, and I'm not interested. You owe me like 8 projects." Well, I was woefully unaware. But that was basically, and I was not diagnosed with ADHD at that point. I had no idea, that it was kind of just the way my brain ran, And this guy was so smart. One of the smartest things he ever did for me is he said, "Hey, I interviewed a guy that just came out of Purdue named Kurt Ladow, and he might want to be your night shift supervisor. I think you might want to interview him." Well, I interviewed him. We liked each other. He's totally the opposite personality of me, and we've been business partners for the last 28 years.
The perfect yin for your yang, huh?
It is. It seriously is. So now when I start talking about my successes, there are successes, because really, quite honestly, I couldn't, I'll tell a story later. There was only one entrepreneurial thing I ever did without him, and I didn't do well. The other ones, everything I did with him, we tore it up. The other one I tried without him, So So now I'm in customer service. I'm doing pretty good. And they come to me and they say, hey, you're kind of rough around the edges. I'm like, I am what I am, man. I am what I am. And they're like, yeah, but we think that you might be able to do sales. Well, I can be what you want me to be.
I got a little bit of that chameleon in you,
I came in like 32 seconds because my dad was in sales, and I knew that sales and ownership were the way to good revenue, to good money.
Uh-huh.
And I'm fairly good at my. So I'm like, I think I could do this. Are we okay? So they gave me the sales job under two conditions. One is I go to the barber that they want me to go to. And two is I go to the mall and get at least a $200 suit and report back next week. So
yeah, they don't tell you in sales that a lot of that revenue gets sunk into just the way you look and the way you smell and all that good stuff.
Well, it really didn't for me, and I'll tell you about that because I thought it did. But okay, so I started out in sales, and now this is my shot, you guys. Are you kidding me? I'm a truck driver, and now hey, dude, they paid for my lunches. I was able to take people to lunches. Are you kidding me? I mean, do you know how lucky I felt? And the car I drove was a company car. My God, I had won the lottery. I'm not going to blow this. So I started making my first sales calls at 6:30 in the morning. Because some people were on, some traffic managers got in super early and left at 2:00. Mm-hmm. And I just do that. I'd be in there with donuts. Now, donuts weren't my thing, but there were a lot of the other guys' things. But I'd be in there and they'd be like, man, nobody else comes in that early. And I'd be like, I didn't even see it as an advantage at the time. Like, oh, well, I'm up and, and I'm here. Well, I got the business. And then really, quite honestly, I became the number one sales rep in the company. And the guy that I beat when I first got into sales, he affectionately nicknamed me Jethro. So, but so Jethro done all right though. All right. So it took me 2 years to beat him, but Jethro beat him, and then I was the number one rep after that. So, in the meantime, there was a freight forwarder that was a customer of ours, and the owner of the company I was with was getting ready to sell, and he was giving me all his big corporate accounts. Okay, so I got all those big corporate accounts, and one of them was a freight forwarder. Now, with ADHD, I'm going to hit the pause button there. With ADHD, a lot of times people learn differently with it because you don't learn traditionally. You got to pick up little things here. That guy said that, and then that person said that. And if that goes like that, well, then wouldn't that be like that? I mean, that's exactly the way my brain works. So he goes, so these guys are like, hey, man, these guys are making tons of money. I remember, by now I got my truck paid off. We're starting to make a little money. We're going to take the kids on a vacation. Things are going really well for us. We're going to put a little addition on the house. And I had thought, well, if at that point I was doing well, but I knew the company was sold. To your point, Marcus, remember what all the movie I'd seen already? I saw the movie. I saw the movie, and somehow I knew that I needed to go find a safer place. So I started to look, and part of the things I'm looking at, there's no freight forwarder in South Bend, Indiana. All these people are selling this local community from Chicago and Detroit, which they hate, right? So all I got to be is the local Tim that I am, and say, hey, man, I got super smart people back here if you got any air freight to get moved, So we did. We opened up an office for Jim Crane for Eagle USA, and we set a goal, said we wanted to be the top station in the country. And people said, well, what are you, crazy, dude? Not a country, in the world. And I said, what are you, crazy? We got London, we got Toronto's killing it right now, Detroit's doing great, LA's doing great. You guys are South Bend, Indiana? Well, we won in the third year. Third year we won. And we didn't win off of his huge revenue, but what we won off of was culture. And we created a culture where nobody left. Everybody was just diving into it. We'd have to tell people to leave at the end of the day. Like,
go enjoy your life.
Go enjoy your life, because people were just so into it, and we were tearing it up. It was doing great. But the most important thing that we did was we developed people. And that was one of the most, as I look back in my 60s now, I am, as I look back, that's one of the most rewarding things that I can say that I did in either intentionally or unintentionally all my life was help people. That was really beneficial to me to be able to now look at people that are the top performing salespeople in whatever market, and this person's doing that, and to know they kind of came up through that culture. Mm-hmm. So I did that. The company I was with asked me, would you kindly consider coming back? The one I'd left. And I'll just tell the story. This is because I have no names here, but I heard these athletes would get these sign-on bonuses things, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So 33 years old, no college education, Jethro all day long, right? I'm like, yeah, but I think it would take a sign-on bonus of, and I'm almost going to put the number out there, 100,000. My wife really didn't want me to go back to him anyway.
So put a steep price tag on it just in case, right?
They said, wonderful. Can you start in 3 weeks?
Wow.
Well, yeah, sure. Yeah. I got to tell Kurt, right? Hey man, I just made a decision that I didn't tell you about because it's my life, not yours. But I'm going back, and I'll go back too. Do you think it's changed the culture? I'm not going to pick on people. The culture's changed because we both were leaving the culture, and I was drinking the juice. I just got a nice check too, right? You know. And I said, yeah, I think it's changed. So he said, okay, here's my contract, hand it in for me. So I'm walking out to the car because I'm going to go to back to the old employer, and I have his contracts in my hand. I'm like, this isn't my business. And I opened his car door and I put it on his seat. Well, the company he was with, that we were both with, did a great job, and they said, dude, stay here. They need you. We need you. We're going to take good care of you. Let Heinz go ahead and do his thing. So that was the one venture that I did without the support. And quite honestly, I left a year later. The culture didn't change. Learned a lot of lessons about people, learned a lot of lessons about people with a lot of money. When money is, if the three of us get together and we do something, never mind those guys. I saw some of that stuff. And this is not to disparage any model, but just to point out that people look at that and they see that stuff. And so your culture should be clean, and they should be fair, and you should be talking about fairness and equity throughout the entire organization. So as at this point now, I'm in freight forwarding, and I did that for 10 years. We were kind of top. And let me stop there and see what you guys want to inject or ingest or anything like that.
For sure. One thing, we talk about culture a lot on this podcast, and you and I were talking before we started recording here, Tim, about my thoughts on Liquid Trucking's culture from being a bit of a fly on the wall. I get to talk to the office staff. I get to talk to the drivers, and I see a fantastic culture. Drivers are always happy. And you touched on something about how good you felt when you saw somebody come up and grow through the organization. And it made me think about an episode that we did here just a few weeks back where I had on some of the most senior drivers at Liquid. And the entire point of the episode was kind of these two older guys that had been working with the company for so long and had all this success. And they're saying, we want the younger generation of drivers to call us. We want to distill this information, all this knowledge that we have. And they're not getting that as much. They don't see as many people reaching out, and we're kind of trying to stoke that fire a little bit and saying, listen, there's a sense of pride that's going to come from these drivers that get to help somebody that's having trouble, and they actually move their day forward and make it easier on them. And I think that that's part of a winning culture, is having senior members of your team that are willing to jump in and help bring up these younger members of your team. And Jason, I wonder if you had any thoughts on that, because I just, like I said, the connection between what Tim's talking about here and an episode that we did recently with your senior drivers, I was just singing in my head. So I'm wondering what you're thinking as we talk about this.
I'm echoing your thoughts and Tim's. A lot of Tim's stories not too different than mine. Driving a pedal route, delivering groceries. As a young driver or a young person starting out in any career, we only have so many folks we can learn from, right? The folks you work with, your parents. You learn the hard way on the job. So if you have anybody that wants to show you, and you can learn from them, you just got to soak that in while you can.
And I would tell you too, the old timers oftentimes want to do that. So you're being, you're not bothering them as much as you think you are. If anything, you're giving them an opportunity to do something that might make them feel fulfilled. And I think that's cool.
Absolutely. And I did want to ask Tim about the lesson that you learned. What would you say the biggest lesson you learned about culture was when you took that year and went off and tried to see if you could go back to the old company and it didn't work? Is there something that kind of was a light bulb in your head?
Yep, it's got to come from number one. You want culture change, it has to come from the very top. I was the number 3 in the company, and I was basically charged with, in my mind too, I was going to take the culture back to what it was, what we all remembered it to be. But that it was a financially tumultuous period, which is very difficult because you have to make some tough decisions anyway. And at the very top, we were not aligned. I was getting back to the culture and the people, and at the very top, we were looking for a deal to sell, and how we get the enterprise value up higher for X amount of people. So we weren't aligned. So I was super bitter at that experience. But really, there was no reason to be bitter. The reality was, you can't like, and I would say this to business owners, is if you're a business owner and you want to, you've heard great stories about Jason Eisenman, and you're like, man, I got to get this guy in my organization, have him run my culture. If he doesn't align with you and you think you can bring somebody else in, to model your culture, absolutely, positively, not, no, it just don't work,
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. So, moving on through your story here, I mean, I really am interested in, talking about your business partner, Kurt, here, because now we've gotten to the point in the story where you left Kurt and it didn't work out for you. Are you back with him at this point?
Yeah. So we went back, I went back to the other place, right? So I'm a job hopper, but only between 2 or 3 places. but yeah, I went back, and actually he had not done really well because the sales and the leadership stuff that I always took care of. Yeah, we had similar experiences. We made it through the year, okay.
Yeah,
and so we teamed up, and then the organization said, hey, we are one of the largest freight forwarders in the country. Yep, we get that. We're one of the best stations for you. Yeah, and you guys are really good at truckload and expedite. Yep, because that's kind of the teeth I grew up on. Why don't you guys start a brokerage for us, you and Kurt? First, we did turnaround for about 5 or 10 years. Not 5 or 10 years, 5 years, where we would go out to terminals that were underperforming, and we would help fix them. And we got really good at it, but it was that's a people thing. That's more of a people thing. So we did that, and then we started the brokerage. And when we started the brokerage, that was my entry into driver turnover, because I was shocked and appalled. Remember, I'm this culture freak. The companies I worked with, we don't have turnover. I don't have turnover unless it's somebody I'm trying to help get out of the company because they're going to be better. It's going to be better for them. We just didn't have it, and I couldn't get loads covered because people couldn't keep their drivers. It was just crazy. So then the company got sold, and we had a decision: did we want to work for a large mega carrier that was private equity held, and that doesn't really sing my song? So I said, nah, I want to leave. And Chris said, I want to leave too. So we had a little small expediter that was our neighbor called Express One, XPO is who they were. Mm-hmm. And it was Mike Welch and Keith Avery. And they were buddies of ours. We competed in the market all the time, man. I'd get stuff of theirs, they get stuff of mine. And I said, here's the deal. Here's what my ADHD brain tells me. my DH brain tells me that truckload is so tough to get to right now that freight forwarders are getting asked to do truckloads and y'all don't know how to do it. So why don't I create a brokerage operation that only serves freight forwarders, and I'll treat these shipments like they're air freight shipments, and you're going to love them. And so we built something called Bounce Logistics, and for them. So it was a separate. It was a part of the XPO entity, and that was our foray into brokerage. So we did brokerage for 3 years. We did really well with it. We grew it up to about 25, 30 team members. Had an awesome culture. That's what drove it. And then large institutional money came in and basically took over that company, and we kind of left at that one. And then when we left at that one, what was the key? When we left at that one, that was the beginning of Stay Metrics, right? Because I'm like, not by now I've been around in carriers, and you guys need help, man. And I Googled driver satisfaction survey. The year's 2012. And back then, Google would say, no results found. I'm like, what? How are we having this big a problem and nobody? I'm not trying to build a survey business. I'm just trying to educate myself. But when I saw that there wasn't one there, like that's it. There's the business model right there. So we went to University of Notre Dame, and I built a business plan. I've done 4 or 5 or 6 of them. That's it. University of Notre Dame. And we started our company in the New Carlisle Library. There's a community room there, and if Kurt and I got there before the little old ladies in the knitting group, we could have the room for the day.
And that's cutthroat business right there.
Is,
You got to show up before the
and
ladies with the knitting needles.
They were not happy. There was a lot of snippiness, and so Notre Dame actually rang us back after we'd done a tour and said, why don't you guys come here and launch this entity out of here? And really the guy that did it is became a friend of mine, and he was actually smart. He was helping me out. He knew I would do well there. And we did. As soon as I got there, the second day, they're saying stuff like, hey, we've got this company coming in that has years of experience with surveys, building surveys, and they were offering to help you tomorrow. Would you like to meet with them? Yes.
Yeah.
And we just did that yes please thing for like 30 times, and we built a hell of a nice little business. And then it was really good. Great customers like Liquid came on, and then I couldn't take it any farther, quite honestly. Where being real honest, there was another competitor that came in the market that was really doing a nice job, and I didn't have a vision for taking our product, and nor did anybody on my team any further than we could. And I think I was smart enough to see that early and start seeking out business partners. And the business partner, I think for me and for probably a lot of people that makes sense, is Tenstreet. And so we sold to Tenstreet, and and I didn't think I'd be here. First, I thought the old, well, I tell you what, So, and then I thought, well, I need to go do some stuff in the wood shop anyway, so I think I'm just going to retire. I'm still here, and 80% of our team is still here. And I'm working on the next version of the product with people that are on the Tenstreet team, So,
sure.
So it's going pretty good.
Well, it sounds like it. And, you've done so much work with and around driver retention and figuring out why it is that drivers don't stick around for a lot of companies. I mean, you see it with mega carriers all the time. A lot of the drivers I speak to on these podcasts, this one in particular, will say, yeah, I used to drive for a mega carrier. It's something that hits on a lot of people's resumes. And the one thing I notice is that if they did drive for one, they probably didn't stay there very long, Tim. And I want to ask you, what's the deal with driver turnover? Why does it tend to be a little bit higher in this industry than what we might see in other industries? And are there companies out there like Liquid that actually have figured out a way to combat that?
The answer is the answer to the last part is yes. Obviously, Liquid has. There's one in every sector. There's one in flatbed. I'm not going to name them, but they've got it figured out. Their number 2 competitor cannot figure it out. And the number 2 competitor, I would say, in that scenario, is they had their culture officer, and don't know why it's not working. Well, I know why it's not working, right? It's north of the culture. The problem is north of the culture office.
Yep, it's uphill.
And so where I think, I think, and I was recently asked this, what percentage of carriers do I think get it? And I think it's only 20. And that's just with 12 years dealing with carriers eye to eye. And do you really care about your drivers? And let me hear you speak about them for a while. And I think it is only 20%. And I think this, when we have to have a week that says thank a truck driver, that is so insincere. It's unbelievable. Even if the fact that we have to do it is insincere. Why do I have to remind you? Why can't we just appreciate these men and women for what they're doing every day and treat them with respect? So, sorry about that. A little bit of rant.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about maybe some advice for drivers from that side of the fence. When it comes to retention, I know that you might have a little bit of advice for drivers, especially with the market conditions as they sit right now. What would you tell a driver if they're happy at their company, if they're angry at their company? What's your advice?
Bite down on a towel. And that would be for everybody. Even if you're with a carrier that you don't like right now, it's not the time to get on the bottom of somebody's dispatch board and or learn their customer base. The reality is when you switch, you can be a driver with all sorts of experience, but that dispatcher is not going to trust you yet, or that load planner is not going to trust you yet with all the freight. So you probably, if you're an established driver with an established carrier now, you might not be happy with the number of miles you're getting, but I would tell you that my advice would be just bite down on a towel for a while. It's no greener. There isn't one carrier I could even tell you that, man, I tell you what, go to these guys, because it's across the board market share. And there is over recruiting that goes on in our industry, which means people don't have a stop button for when they recruit. So that means that if you and I are drivers and the company just brought in 5 more drivers, I'm going to give $50 a week. You're going to get $50 a week, right?
Sure.
So you don't. I'd say now is not the time to leave. I would say that when you are looking, maybe now is the time to start looking. Quite honestly, and doing your research on company cultures and what's out there. And I know there's a lot of drivers that listen to this that aren't Liquid drivers, and I would encourage you. I'm not affiliated with Liquid in any way, shape, or form. I've just known them as a customer and a friend, and I would say I would definitely check out their culture. But I would do some culture shopping now, so you kind of know where you want to land. And then I wouldn't make any moves until the market shows 2 to 3 months of sustainability.
Okay, that's good advice there, and advice from somebody who's been in it for a long time and has seen these market trends and the way that things tend to respond. So take that advice under I'm at a loss for words here. Sorry for the brain fart, because I'm thinking about teeing Jason up with a question here, but take that advice from Tim. That's what I'll leave it at. Now, Jason, with regards to driver retention, I've said it already a couple times. Tim and I talked before we came on. I get to talk to Liquid drivers a lot. They're happy. The culture seems to be working there. What's Liquid's take on driver retention? Is it all in the pay and the bonus structure? Is it in the way you keep your drivers? How do you keep that driver retention number down? What are the things that you're kind of doing on the day-to-day, Jason, that help keep that number low?
That's a good question. I think it's a moving target, but there's always the big 3, which is, respect and pay and respect. I see those move back and forth. Tim might agree there. Equipment, and then just taking it back to people. And I think that's one of the center places that we can agree on, going back to when I first got my CDL. I was working the docks of a warehouse for a food distributor, picking in the freezer and loading trucks. And they said, "Hey kid, you want to go deliver some groceries in a box truck?" an express route, and they taught me how to drive a box truck, and then they taught me how to drive a semi, and if you've driven and you're out there in the winter, the cold, the summer, the hot, all the things that go with driving, and you apply what you learn as a person doing the job to what we do today, that we all bleed red, we all have families that we want to go home to, and our goals are to serve our customers and go home safe. And if you focus on some of those things first, I find it really helps. I worked for a mega carrier in my career. I was driver ID 101G. They didn't know my name, and that's not cool. It's really not. So when people ask me, like, who drives truck 62 whatever, I'm like, I don't have a clue, because I've never memorized truck numbers. You got to memorize the driver's name, and then you go look up their truck number, because the truck ain't driving itself.
No.
I mean, they might one day, but in the meantime, there's a human sitting behind the wheel.
There you go.
And that's what I think people lose track of.
Do you think, Jason, that your experience, coming up through that, gives you more empathy for what your own drivers go through?
I hope, I hope it's definitely charted the course. I can tell the story real quick. I was young and probably 19, and this is when I had gotten my Class A CDL, and they were sending me to Omaha on a route, probably a 35, 40-foot box truck full of groceries. Showed up at the first delivery, and the ramp to unload all the groceries, because you had to two-wheel these down a ramp, they had loaded it on top of the ramp, and I was like, well, how am I going to get all the food out of the truck? And they said, well, just stand on the back and set 5-6 boxes on the edge, get down, put them on your two-wheeler, and do that all day. And I was like, no, that's not going to fly. And so there's so many times where you just you can't lose track. You try really hard not to lose track of when everybody leaves work, we're still just a human.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You got to
put a pin in that one right there. Yep.
Yeah.
So many times in my career, in the office and in driving, people lose track of the fact that we're still human.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to do. I heard an adage a while back that said everybody that you interact with during the day is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. And
sure.
Keeping that in mind, I think, we talk about that adage from a customer service standpoint. A lot of times we say, oh, you walk into that receiver, you don't know what that guy's been through. He might be in a bad mood. Best thing you can do is hit him right in the face with a smile and just try to make his day better. While also doing your job.
Yes.
It is. And sometimes I think that's underappreciated, how far a little kindness can go in somebody's day. Customer service notwithstanding, opening a door for somebody. How many times have you been going into the store and you've just been chewing on your bottom lip because the day is garbage, and a nice old lady opens the door for you and smiles at you? You know what? That 5 seconds, it was the best part of my day. It's
Absolutely.
that quick. Yeah. And, there's a big part that's the human side of the job that we all do. And Tim, you said, I want to put a pin in something there when Jason talked about going home and just being a human. I know you've got some thoughts on work-life balance, and I would like to kind of breach that topic with you a little bit. I'm fortunate in that I work at this job making these podcasts. I get to kind of work around everybody else's schedule. I get to make my own hours. If I'm up here at 2 a.m. recording something, as long as it's done on time and it's done to the quality, it's fine. So I'm pretty lucky when it comes to work-life balance. But truck drivers, by and large, I mean, I just talked to one yesterday who he just left. This is for a different podcast, but he just left today, and he'll be out until October 24th. Yeah. How do you talk about work-life balance? He's not home until late October.
No, yeah. What? There's another way. Here's the way I think about it. What's your identity? what's my identity, right? What's my identity? And what do I want it to be? And for goodness sakes, I don't want it to be a businessman that was in trucking. Please, no. Please, no. Okay. So, but I have, it's kind of sad because I've been thinking a lot about this lately, giving some headspace to it, and I've been following some of my peers that are older than me, that are 63, 64 years old, and I see them cycling through the industry and taking jobs, and because we have to, right? So it's so difficult. And by the way, oftentimes your work-life identity is not the same as your identity at home. I just got a head nod there. Okay.
Yeah, it's very true.
I know, right? So you can lose.
My wife would kick me out if I kept this persona up 24
absolutely.
hours a day.
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be welcome for sure. But you lose yourself. You can lose your identity in your career. It becomes everything. Now, hey, these guys that are driving truck, they're not in the same situation. I was able to build a business and sell it. So I'm in a different situation than they are. A lot of these guys have to drive truck until they can't anymore. Mm-hmm. And so there's the bad news. Where's the good news, Tim? Can you give us any good news on work-life balance? I think I can. And here's what I found is you have to, and not you don't have to do anything, but consider thinking of yourself before you got in the game, whatever the game was. What did you like to do? And for me, it was being in the woods and building forts and building stuff. And now coming to find out, I really like wood carving, right? And forestry. Those are two hobbies I'm getting into now. So look for things that are outside of work that you can engage with, that will help you diversify a little bit of who you are, and provide some fulfillment outside of work. Because if work is the only place we're getting fulfillment, then that's the guys that say, yeah, I'm going to do it until I'm 85. Well, that's because the only thing that's getting you fulfillment,
Right. Yeah. I think about Jason, a driver on your fleet right now who's been on the podcast and shared some of his experience with us before, and that's Matt McKellar. Is a guy who lives out of his truck, and he has so many great pictures that he sent me and so many great stories about stopping because he likes to go on these hikes, and he'll find, unique places to stop and go on a beautiful hike in the middle of his route. Or he's a big reader and he loves to find good places to park and just be out in nature and read. And, I hear about a guy like that and think, you're talking about identity. His identity to me, and I would want to ask him this, but his identity to me is a traveler. He's not a truck driver. Yeah. He's a traveler. Yeah. And he's happens to be in a profession that allows him to live that identity and be that person. And Jason, I know that you've got a lot of drivers that are like that, unique in their own ways. And that's one of the cool parts about this job is I get to uncover those stories, which I feel very fortunate in that, because when the drivers start sending me pictures and things like that from what they're doing out on the road, you can tell that it's like you're saying, Tim, these aren't necessarily drivers by identity. These are people that drive. And it's really cool to see. Jason, I wonder if you've got any thoughts on that, just based on what you've seen from some of your drivers and the things that they get into out there on the road.
You're 100% right. And Matt's a super cool guy. I love his story. And he's very smart. One thing you did mention, he's very into his money and money management and investing. And you can tell he's puts a lot of time and effort into that, planning for his future. But you're right. So what is driving to you? Is it a job, just a paycheck every Friday, and that's okay? Is it your identity? Is it part of a combination of both? We've got guys that live in the truck, all the way down to guys that are, home daily, that are trainers. And like a baseball team, you got to have all the players on the field, and you got to have a mix of talents, skills, wants, desires, and I think that having that mix of all these lives coming together, different needs, and interests at different points in their lives. It keeps everything, ticking along, and we try to be the best we can for everyone's unique scenarios. From when someone's having a baby to maybe getting a divorce or losing a family member. It's so cool watching everybody go through life and different periods and seeing those identities. It's just pretty cool from where I sit.
I want to add something to that because I've watched Liquid for many, many years, and one of the unique things that I've watched Liquid do that other people don't do is they engage actively in drivers that they find that are in distress. And I distress is a strong word there, but what Jason just discussed is that no, you're going through. You got a period of life you're going through. We're just not going to sit here neutral. We're going to see if we can help you some way through it.
And you see it a lot. I've heard plenty of stories from drivers, and to be honest with you, a lot of them tell them in confidence. I hear the stories about the way, I hear some of them on the podcast, but I'll just be having a casual conversation when that will come up. And you talk about work-life balance, you talk about taking pride in your job. I mean, if that were me, I know my employer takes care of me in a lot the same way. If something bad is happening, they're involved, and it's a great thing to have. I feel lucky to be able to work at a job for a company like that.
Yeah, they're rare, right? I'm not trying to do a promotion here for Liquid, but they really are rare. And I would tell you that the cultures of Liquid, the cultures are all unique, so I'm not going to say that there's 5 other ones that are just out like theirs, but people that have that unique culture that is so focused on that driver and their specific needs, I would say that there's less than 10, in my opinion, that are that intentional. There's a lot of them that have policies and procedures that are friendly, and we do this, we do that, we're going to do this, but people that really are like, wait a minute, Johnny's having a tough time, right now. We want to see if we can help him out, and we're going to do this for him. That's pretty rare out there, and Liquid's one of those folks that does.
Yeah, real diamond in the rough, for sure. And you might not be doing a promotion, Tim, but I'm the guy with the Liquid Trucking podcast hat on, so I'll do promotion all day long.
Here's the deal. In all seriousness, I try to stay neutral, but I want to tell you the truth. And it is. That's the way I believe about the company, and so that's where it is.
Yeah, with some firsthand knowledge too of it, and that's one of the coolest parts about having you on here today is you've worked in a capacity with Liquid. You have knowledge of the way that the company functions, and it's just been fantastic having you on here today. I've already pushed this thing, I feel like, about twice as long as what we were planning on, and so thank you for being so gracious with your time. I'm gonna put out something here as a suggestion to Jason, because Jason, I've got a laundry list of things that we haven't even brought up at this point in time in the conversation. What would you think about bringing Tim back sometime in the future for a part 2 so we can get into some of the rest of these topics that you and I talked about? This has been a fantastic conversation. I'd love to revisit it.
Well, from my seat, I love Tim. I tell him that every time. He's somebody that I learned from, and I thought that everybody that listens to our podcast would enjoy listening to his perspective, because that's what life's all about, right? Kind of a kaleidoscope of perspectives. So as long as Tim's open for it, and we can get some more topics covered, the answer is always a yes from me.
Yeah, thank you for that. It was very kind. I would share with you that I would have an interest. I would want to see what kind of feedback you get from the drivers, and if they could tell you what they want to hear more, and we can get some there. Like, hey man, there's specific stuff here. I mean, there is a laundry list of stuff, but I'd be super curious as to if there's stuff that the drivers want more expansion on.
I was just going to plug the podcast at liquidtrucking.com if you're listening right now. And you have a question for Tim, I'm telling you, amazing guy to talk to and learn from. So hit us at podcast@liquidtrucking.com, and maybe we'll have him back.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, Thank you again. I can't say that enough. I do want to make some room here for any final thoughts that you might have before we let you get back to it.
Yeah. Thank you both for the opportunity. This industry's been great to me. Truck driving's been great to me. I like to give back. And you had mentioned something about 5 minutes ago, both you and Jason did, about the kindness that we extend to each other. And I would just like to encourage people to see if you can take somebody today and put a smile on their face and just extend some kindness to somebody who might need it. Huh? You never know. Thank you for having me.
Sage advice there from Tim Hindes and Jason Eisenman, our other guest. Thank you guys both. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be right back here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast. Man, what a fantastic conversation with Jason and Tim Hindes there. And look, I really want to drive this point home. Tim really wants to hear what the drivers think of this interview. He wants to know if you guys have any feedback or if any questions arise in your mind when you're listening. So if you just listen through that and you're thinking, man, I've got some things I would like to hear Tim talk about, send them to me, send them to Jason, get those in our hands ASAP, because we want to get Tim back here, and your guys' response is going to be instrumental in that. So anything you would like to hear Tim talk about or get his thoughts on, send it over to podcast@liquidtrucking.com or contact me directly if you've got my phone number. Feel free to use it. Call or text anytime. If I'm sleeping or something like that, don't worry about it. I keep my phone on silent when the eyes are closed, so you're not going to wake me up. Get in touch when it's convenient for you, and I'll get back in touch with you so that we can hear what you thought of the interview and maybe pass some of your questions on to Tim if we're able to get him on again in the future. This was really cool, but we have gone so long. This is probably our second longest episode to date, maybe our third. Still, it's a long episode, so I'm going to clam up and get out of here. Stay safe out there, drivers. Keep the shiny side up, and we'll see you next week right here on the Liquid Trucking Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in and being the gold standard of drivers on the road. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and tune in next week for another episode of the Liquid Trucking Podcast.